The Indiana Jones trilogy has been part of the greatest trilogy of all time conversation for decades now. So how come in the years 2008 and 2023, Lucasfilm opted to continue this story? Unfortunately, despite the original trilogy remaining as one of my favorite sagas ever told, it still hurts just how terrible this franchise became with its later installments. So today, we're discussing how Indiana Jones went from incredible to terrible. Let's go back to the year 1981, when Indiana Jones made his official debut to audiences everywhere. Before the movie opened, polling showed little interest in the adventure flick. Nonetheless, Raiders of the Lost Ark became the highest grossing movie of 1981, earning $354 million worldwide. In today's market, that's equivalent to $1.2 billion. So I guess great reviews really help spread the word to see this movie in theaters. And rightfully so. To this day, Raiders is one of my favorite movies, and still debatably the best of the franchise. When I think of what makes Raiders of the Lost Ark an incredible film, I think of its sense of adventure, groundbreaking action scenes, clever humor, charming romance, use of practical effects, irreplaceable music, and Harrison Ford's iconic performance as Indiana Jones. There's nothing this movie doesn't deliver from what you want out of an action adventure. It's truly the cream of the crop. And I wouldn't be surprised if Raiders inspired people over the years to study archaeology. I mean, how could it not? Who wouldn't want to be like Indiana Jones? Harrison Ford's portrayal in Raiders as a slick, rugged, sarcastic hero made for one of cinema's coolest characters in history. There's really nothing this guy can't do, despite his flaws. You know what's missing from modern-day action-adventure movies, though, that Raiders has? It's the jaw-dropping, realistic, gritty action. Obviously, a lot of that can be credited to Spielberg's use of practical effects back in the day. However, it's more than just that. Each action scene in Raiders feels unique, as if it's never been done before in any other movie. Also, people actually die in brutal ways. There's a good amount of blood in Raiders, which I love. The action itself is exhilarating too. I could seriously watch many of these set pieces repeatedly, and no fun is lost. The best action sequence of the film comes near the end, where Indy fights on this truck that's transporting the Ark of the Covenant. It's one of cinema's all-time best scenes. It's a shame most action movies these days can't replicate greatness like this. But what makes Raiders truly stand out amongst the crowded field and its genre even more is its MacGuffin, making for not only an amazing action-adventure flick, but also a great mystery too. When you see treasure hunting movies now, there's just nothing cool about the artifacts our protagonists are going after. But Raiders integrates one of the most well-known historical artifacts, the Ark of the Covenant, as its main MacGuffin. From the moment the film first mentions the Ark, you wonder, what's inside, and what kind of power are the Nazis in for? So instantly, the audience becomes very curious of the Ark too. Then following Raiders, along came a prequel in 1984, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. One thing I never understood about this movie is the hate it gets. A lot of people claim it's too dark, and for that reason, it doesn't feel like an Indiana Jones movie. But I disagree. Sure, it's darker, however, that's what makes it feel fresh. It was nice to have a film that wasn't an exact replica of Raiders, but is literally just as much fun. The opening sequence stands out as one of the franchise's best. Short Round is a great new character, the villains are intimidating, the set pieces are still incredible, and the final 45 minutes is non-stop dopamine. The Temple of Doom is a worthy follow-up, and in my opinion, it's easily in the top 10 best sequels of all time. So lighten up and enjoy the movie, sheesh! Lastly, in 1989, audiences were treated to a perfect finale. Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. The general consensus is that Indiana Jones's third installment is second best in the franchise. Some even call it the best. Nonetheless, it's easy to understand why this film is loved by the general public. First off, it's a return to formula. The story follows similar beats as Raiders. The archaeological artifact is another historically well-known MacGuffin, this time the Holy Grail. Nazis are once again the villains, and characters from the first movie reappear. The best new character this time though is played by Sean Connery, portraying Henry Jones Sr. Everyone, including myself, loves this father-son duo on screen. I legitimately think you can argue Indiana and his father are the best character combo this franchise has ever offered. But all in all, The Last Crusade ended Indiana's story the right way. This final closing shot was perfect, and I'm of the belief we did not need another movie. But then, 19 years later came Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Oddly enough, despite my Indiana Jones fandom since birth, it took me until 2022 to watch this film. Mostly because the movie received poor audience reviews over the years, and the footage I had seen wasn't any good. The best thing Crystal Skull has going for it is it's not the worst of the Indy franchise. In all honesty, I think Indy's fourth adventure is a decent installment, but far from the greatest that is the trilogy. Ford is still amazing, almost like he's barely aged. Some of that is help from stuntmen, but Ford carries himself here like he did 20 years prior. Crystal Skull also brings back the iconic music from the originals. The aura is no different either. It has the look and feel of an indie movie, with some pretty great action sequences too. But my biggest gripe with this film is the fact that it's pretty unnecessary. Why make a fourth entry for anything other than money purposes? Story-wise, it's not needed. The one element that acts as the icing on the cake is Indy's marriage to Marion, as well as the storyline with his kid, played by Shia LaBeouf, but outside of that, I don't find much of a need for the movie. Another big gripe of mine is the suspension of disbelief aspect. You have to do that an awful lot while watching Crystal Skull. From nuclear bomb fridges, to monkeys swinging on vines, to aliens, this film is absurd at times, with a plethora of dumb scenes. Although, as mentioned, it's decent, and not the worst. Oh no, that came 15 years later, with The Dial of Destiny, when this franchise truly dove into terrible territory. Did anybody want this movie? No. But Disney still went ahead and made it. That resulted in a lot of money lost for Disney, and on top of that, they gave us one of the worst movies of 2023. The opening sequence is partly entertaining, and the best scene in the movie by far. But man, does CGI and poor visual effects make it difficult to fully enjoy. Funny enough, the de-aging of Indy looks better than the surrounding environment. I guess this scene is set at night to hide the ugly computer graphics taking up most of the screen. Unfortunately too, the overuse of non-practical effects doesn't end here. Pretty much in every action sequence, computer-generated images are very noticeable. Would there be some bad green screen in the original movies? Yeah, but the action sequences themselves in those films hold up to this day, because they didn't rely on computer graphics to make their action scenes. I'm sorry, but there isn't a single set piece in The Dial of Destiny that looks good. And as part of the Indiana Jones franchise, that's extremely disappointing. If you ask me, an indie movie doesn't work if none of the action sequences work. But action aside, the biggest issue with Dial of Destiny is the runtime. Why on earth is this 2 hours and 34 minutes? Let's get this right. You chose to make the Indiana Jones movie with an 80-year-old Harrison Ford the longest one, instead of one of the earlier editions when he was in his 30s and 40s? By making this a 2.5 hour flick, it gets boring. There's nothing exciting about an 80-year-old man starring in an action movie. It doesn't help that his co-star, played by Phoebe Waller-Bridge, is one of the worst side characters ever written for these movies. And I said Mac was pretty bad in Crystal Skull, so you're sitting there after the opening scene, hoping this thing will just end. If you thought Crystal Skull was unnecessary, wait till you sit through this one. Anyway, let's move on to some more issues. So something I don't understand with the newer Indiana Jones movies is why they don't use real-life artifacts as their main MacGuffins. It works tremendously in Raiders and Last Crusade, but Crystal Skull and Dial decide to throw anything remotely realistic out the window, and instead make their artifacts an alien skull and a time-traveling dial. Listen, I love time travel content, and part of me likes the idea of this dial, but it's still kind of dumb. It'd be one thing if they traveled back a couple decades. It's another thing though when you travel back to the Siege of Syracuse in 212 BC. Just like with Crystal, again, you really have to suspend your disbelief here. I actually will say though, Mads Mikkelsen is a standout. He's not only great as an actor here, but I gotta give them some credit for delivering one of Indy's coolest villains. I love his motivation for wanting this dial. It makes total sense. If a device like this existed in in real life, I'm sure some Nazis would have attempted the same thing, if only the rest of it wasn't ruined by awful visual effects, a long runtime, and a bizarre finale. Speaking of which, the ending is very anticlimactic. They may have created one of Indiana Jones's best villains in this installment, but they don't finish his story well. He just dies in a CGI plane crash. From there, the movie ends back in present day where everyone is getting along at Jones's apartment. Then Marion walks in, the two make up and kiss, and well, that's it. Now, people said they loved this moment because it pays homage to Raiders, and a lot felt like the story between them was deeper because Indy and Marion's son had died in the war after Crystal Skull, causing a rift in their marriage. But the same people who said they cared about their son dying are the same people who said they hated Shia LaBeouf in Crystal Skull. So how does that make any sense? It's a shame. This movie could have been so much more. I wouldn't have even minded if they recast Indy with a younger actor in order to make the film work. Hey Alden. But unfortunately, the Indiana Jones movies ended on a low note. I love James Mangold, but this was not it. Maybe in 20 years, when they decide to reboot this franchise, they'll return it back to its past glory. So there you guys have it. That's how Indiana Jones went from incredible to terrible. But I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Do you think The Dial of Destiny is a terrible movie too? And what is your favorite Indiana Jones movie of all time? Let me know all of your thoughts in the comments. Anyway, thank you all so much as always for watching this video essay. If you haven't done so already, make sure you give this video a thumbs up and click that subscribe button. I'll catch you guys later this week with more content. See you then.